Greetings, ladies and gentlemen, dear listeners. This is COMETSA Radio Africa, the voice of COMETSA, the organization everybody wants to be associated with. The mind, the journey, the destiny. We apply our mind to the journey that takes us to our destiny. That is our philosophy. It's about the plugged and active mind. It's about a sharing mind, futuristic mind, and inquiring mind. The journey is about enthusiastically sharing our ideas. It's about giving as we learn, retaining and investing our learnings, and continuously searching for opportunities. When the destiny is achieved, we see that by high productivity and profitability, social responsibility and caring for each other, growth and sustainability, and guaranteeing renewal and survival. We are about informing and entertaining. We develop and educate. We empower and support. We associate and network. That is the idea. We are a business and professional management services 24/7 internet streaming radio station. We broadcast music and talk shows across the world. Our objective is to use the African storytelling and the Lekgotla conversation methodology in offering career coaching, education and learning guidance, continuous professional development, enterprise and entrepreneurship development, and of course, connecting supply to demand. Our talk shows aim to affirm and support business professionals and entrepreneurs in their personal and professional journey of bringing a difference to the world. These are the talk shows that recognize excellence and greatness. Professionals and entrepreneurs are invited as recognition of the great contribution they are making to humanity. We have a network of associates, members, and stakeholders who know our quality standards and therefore make recommendations to our production team. The conversations become lifelong account of our guests' work since they are recorded on Spreaker Studio, distributed on COMETSA Africa Podcast, Spreaker Podcast, Apple Podcast, Google Podcast, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Castbox, Deezer, Podcast Addict, Podchaser, YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, and many more other platforms that we hope to add to the distribution platforms. We are building a solid ecosystem of professionals and entrepreneurs committed to the empowerment of others. Collaboration across sectors, sharing of insights and knowledge, building a base for succession and inheritance, and safeguarding the legacies for generations after us. We have inherited these legacies from our forefathers and mothers, not to waste them, but to pass them on to generations after us. That is our duty and our responsibility. My name is Sam Zima. I am the CEO and Executive Business Coach at COMETSA GOC International, and you are welcome to visit our website. The address is www.cometsa-goc.com. The same principles that govern our organization are the principles that govern our talk show and the radio programs. And they are win-win approach, holistic mindset, competency development, demanding accountability, ethical inclusive practice, and progressive transformation. You may become our member by applying online to COMETSA Friends and Supporters Club NPO at www.cometsaclub.africa and become part of this movement of mobilizing professionals and entrepreneurs to do good to their communities and their fellow human beings. You're welcome to send us email at callcenter@comesa-goc.com. At this time, I want to welcome our sister from across the Atlantic in New Jersey, USA, my sister Genae Young. Greetings, how are you doing?
My brother Sam, Mr. Seema, thank you so much. Wow, I feel really, really humbled and blessed to be a part of your broadcast. I have not been able to turn it off since I learned about it. I could stream it 24 hours a day. The work that you're doing is amazing. Thank you for having me on your show.
Beautiful, and thank you for switching on to our internet-based radio station. Indeed, it is 24/7. We are mindful that while this side of the world we are sleeping, our brothers and sisters in the US and North America and many other parts of the world are enjoying the beautiful lineup of music. I'm glad that you are one of those. Lovely stuff. And I see it on the statistics because I do get a report from the platform, and I can tell at any point in time which people, which country are switched onto our platform, which is the beauty of the modern technology.
That is, wow. So you can see that we over here across the Atlantic are listening.
Absolutely.
Infectious Beats, great interview. So, I mean, you have something wonderful that you're doing, and the work that you're doing in your country is amazing. So,
thank you. So today I'm going to induct you into the African storytelling methodology.
Okay.
Yeah. And what we call the Lekgotla conversation approach, which is basically a traditional meeting setup. Anywhere in Africa, when you hear them talking about the traditional meeting, they will be talking about the village meeting under the leadership of the village leaders. And it follows the same principle, which for the Western people, I liken it to the concept of time to think as put forward by Nancy Klein.
Yes, absolutely.
So if you want to get closer to understanding the principles of Lekgotla, read the books by Nancy Klein, then you will understand. It meets those 10 principles that you need to follow to create a thinking environment. And you will experience it, and at the end of the show, we can reflect a little bit, and then I can tell you some of the principles, and then you will let me know if indeed you felt them during our conversation.
Terrific. I look forward to it. Thank you. It sounds like a wonderful tradition. How could you say it again for me?
Lekgotla. Lekgotla.
Beautiful.
That is the Sepedi language, which is the Northern Sotho language. And then in Setswana or Tswana, in Botswana, they will say Khotla. Then they will just take LE off. Then they say Khotla. Now, Khotla could mean the place where people meet, or it could mean the concept itself of getting together as a group and applying certain principles to ensure effectiveness, respect, and giving each other space to engage in a conversation without being interrupted. And it happened very seamlessly without the head, the king saying anything. As long as you have the king's stick in your hand, that means you are on the floor, and anybody that interrupts without having the stick in the hand is breaking one of the important principles of Lekgotla, which says, don't interrupt when fellow human being is busy talking.
Wow. That is beautiful. And very needed, as there's so much that we're all trying to say and get out there, so much with communication. So to be able to listen and hear your fellow human being out, it's a beautiful practice. So thank you.
Beautiful.
And when you talk about bringing everyone together, sounds kind of like professionally sometimes in doing facilitation and all, people sit in a circle. Yes. And we have conversations. So it sounds like we've adapted some of those principles and management and training and facilitation.
Absolutely. I know a fellow consultant in Netherlands that lived in Botswana for many years. and has taken the Lekgotla concept and is using it across the globe in facilitating team sessions and team development meetings. So I'm going to share with you a manual because we put together a commercial Lekgotla facilitation manual, and you can read it. And in the coming 2 weeks, we will be recording a session with a fellow colleague who has attended a full year of Lekgotla workshops, and we want to record it and then make it available to our listeners, so we can exchange.
Wonderful. With all the change going on in the world, being able to hear people out is very important.
Beautiful. Beautiful. So today I want us to focus on you, and I want to start from early childhood. How was it growing up in Phyllis? I'm told by yourself that you're living in New Jersey, but you are actually originally from Philadelphia.
I am, yes. So I'm originally from Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. I was a child in the 80s, and my teen years were in the 90s. So just to picture the backdrop of the city at the time, I lived in a working class neighborhood where I lived at home with my mother and my father, and I have a sister. And we lived in a street of homes that are all connected. We call them row homes. And growing up in Philadelphia at that time felt like, I don't know, it's an experience that I don't see in the cities today as it was back in that time. Kids going outside to play. We used to run up and down the street and skate. We used to play jump rope and hopscotch. A lot of kids came out and played all of the time. We didn't have as much technology. Children today usually are playing on their technology with their friends. So it's a very different sort of scene today than it was then. But it was a beautiful time growing up back then. Lots of community and connection was a part of the landscape in my life growing up.
Wow. So how many siblings do you have?
So I have two, and my sister and I grew up together.
Yes. You are twin sister.
So it's myself and my sister. Yes.
Yes. Okay. And tell me, are the parents still alive?
My parents are still alive, still living in the same place. Yes.
In Philadelphia.
Yes.
So every time you say I'm going home, you mean Philadelphia?
Oh, I go to Philadelphia. I go home. I can go in the room I grew up in, which has changed a little bit, but it's the room that I grew up in. My parents are still there, so I still go to Philadelphia and call Philadelphia my home, where I live.
I imagine that growing up there, you must have come into contact with other minorities. It's not only African Americans living in Philadelphia, right?
Oh my gosh, absolutely. I mean, I could tell you just through my school journey. So I can take you through, my neighborhood was primarily African-American working class neighborhood in the 80s. And I went to school primarily with other African-American children. My elementary school was right around the corner from my home. And there I had a wonderful experience with amazing teachers that I credit today for a big part of my journey. Most especially my 4th and 5th grade teachers, Ms. Stuckey and Ms. Smith, who were so instrumental because they connected so deeply with the children.
Yes.
So if you ever had an issue or you were feeling upset, when your teacher can come to your level and look you in the eye and say something encouraging, it makes you feel motivated to want to achieve and do as well as you can. You feel really proud when you've done your homework and your teacher is just as happy that you got an A as you are. So I credit them for their enthusiasm and the way they managed the classroom and connected with us children for how my life ended up coming together. And I'll talk about
So your mommy and daddy didn't have to give you a spank you for you to be able to do the homework and pass your work. It was just happening seamlessly.
Not too much. I will say though, there were some times where it was really tough, and my mother sat for hours if necessary at the dining room table to work out math problems and to make sure that I understood. So as much as I can credit my teachers, really great teachers, I can also be really happy to look back on the influence of my parents. My father was one who would say, you know, if I came home with a B, he'd say, well, why didn't you get an A? You know, you could get an A, and, you know, push and motivate you towards getting an A. Yeah. And mom would just tirelessly sit at the table with us and make sure that we got our homework done. And she did that all the way through high school, making sure that we got our homework done until she finally felt like, okay, hands off, you can handle this now. But she was always a part of the education journey. So great teachers, and with my parents' help, I feel like that prepared me in elementary school. I ended up reading above my grade level, which early in my journey I didn't, but eventually by the time I got into 3rd and 4th and 5th grade, I started reading above grade level and started doing pretty well with my mathematics. And that prepared me to go to an academic middle school. It was a lottery middle school, and this kind of connects into the diversity question you were asking me about.
Yes.
It was a lottery middle school, and it was an academic middle school. And we call it Magnet Middle School in Philadelphia, meaning it pulls from all of the different neighborhoods in Philadelphia. And so I applied, and you had to have all A's and 1 B in a minor subject, which I qualified for that. And then went into the lottery and was selected for this middle school. This middle school it was called Samson Friedman Middle School, and it shifted a bit today. But it was a school that we shared a building. One side of the building was for the children that were selected academically to attend the school, and the other side of the building was for children with special needs. That was actually called the J.E. Hill School. And so it was called Samson Friedman, the Academy of the Humanities. And part of the humanities curriculum was when we did our academic studies. It was a blue ribbon school, so we often learned 1 grade level ahead of the actual grade you were in. So 6th grade curriculum was more like 7th grade curriculum. So it was a very tedious sort of academic curriculum. But as a part of our humanities classes, we would have to volunteer on the J.E. Hill side of the school. And so we helped children with special needs. We went into the classrooms and we would help children with special needs. And that's where I could appreciate that I began to learn, and the school would encourage us to appreciate when people had different needs or they were differently abled than others. Still very valuable. It called us to be very compassionate towards other people and to try to find the similarities in all of us versus looking at our differences. And so that was a very early lesson in diversity that would further in high school, but that was a very early lesson that I would get in diversity.
It does look like that gave you the foundation for what you are doing today, and I know we're going to come to that later. Yes. And this is fascinating for me, and that's why I always start my conversations with the early childhood and early learning, because in many cases you can see how then people progress from that foundation. So tell me, your parents, are they professional people, or what type of careers did they have?
Sure. So my father worked for the city of Philadelphia for about almost 35 years, actually. He recently retired just a few years ago. But he was an enforcement supervisor, and he worked for the Parking Authority, which is like the city enforcement for parking, booting, ticketing, etc. So he was in management there. And my mother she was an administrative assistant, and her career was mostly spent in the medical field. And she was an office administrator for most of her career. She would sometimes work part-time because she devoted a lot of time towards my sister and I with our education. So she would supplement income, but my father was head of household.
Wow, beautiful. And tell me, so what subjects did you finish your middle school with?
Oh, so middle school was very humanities focused, and we had a general curriculum of math, science, all of those regular general curriculum, but the academic emphasis on what we were learning in middle school was of great importance. And so I did end up doing well. I learned a lot from that school. And it was a very small school, very very close-knit, pardon me, I just want to make sure I get this off, very close-knit community that drew from kids all across the neighborhood. So, all across the city. So different from my traditional neighborhood school where a lot of my friends that I grew up on my street went. That was a larger school and most people from the neighborhood would go there. This school was smaller, and although it drew from different parts of the city, we got to know children from different areas that all were academically inclined. Most of us went on to some of the academic high schools. I ended up going to what's called Philadelphia High School for Girls, or commonly known as Girls High. It was one of the top 3 high schools in Philadelphia at the time. And also it was rated one, it was top 10 of Pennsylvania high schools at the time in the 90s that I attended there. So you had to have straight A's again and only a B to be accepted into Girls High. And I was able to make my grades and got accepted into Girls High. Now, this was a bigger platform. This is high school, and it's also, again, called a magnet school because it's an academic high school. And we drew from children all across the city, but this time, different from middle school where most of the students were African American, but academically performing. This one truly pulled from the population of Philadelphia. Philadelphia is a very diverse city. You could go, I grew up in Eastern Philadelphia, which is mostly African American. In different parts of the town, we have a very prominent Chinatown where many Asians live in Chinatown. We have a very strong Irish population in Philadelphia. There's a very strong Italian population we call Little Italy. There's a Jewish population. So there were all types of students, Indian population, all types of students that ended up going to my high school. So it was all girls, all academic, from all different areas. And that's really when I began to learn about different cultures. I'll never forget one of my first lessons in high school when I felt like I became really smacked in the face, if you will, with what cultural diversity was, is that I saw an Asian student in 9th grade, and we're all, coming out our shell and trying to get to know each other. And so I greeted her and asked her, where she was from in China.
Yes.
And she looked at me and she said, I'm not Chinese, I'm Cambodian. I didn't even know the difference. Like, I had never interacted with people of different cultures. And so she looked Asian to me, and I made an assumption that she was Chinese because in my small teenage mind at that time, all that I knew was my community and what others would say about what other people looked like or who they were. So this experience in high school really got me to understand different types of diversity. So we were talking, and I learned more about Cambodia and this young lady who was Cambodian. And one of my second lessons was that I was talking to another woman who was a young lady who was actually Chinese. She was actually Chinese, but I asked her when she moved here, and she said, although I'm Chinese and I look Chinese, I've never been to China. My parents were born in America, but they're both of Chinese descent. My grandparents moved here back in the early 1900s. So she had never been to China, and she looked Chinese, but she was American.
Wow.
And she was very American in the way that she connected with others and acted and spoke. So there were some young ladies who were from different countries who had actually moved to the country in their lifetime. And then there were others who looked like they were from different countries, but were very American and had never been to their, if you will, fatherland, if you will, or motherland. They had never been there, but their parents, they all married people who were of that culture. So they all looked like they were from a different culture, but they actually weren't. So I had never had an experience like that before, but high school taught me that.
Wow. I remember I came once to Phyllis on a program as bankers organized by the late Reverend Leon Sullivan's organization. And, and I think we must have spent 2 days in Philadelphia. And I remember vividly, and I was like, sure, this looks very much multicultural city. And we went on I can't remember the name of the mall, but it's a big mall outside there that we went to. And when you were at that mall, you just felt like, you know what, this is the center of the universe. And I can relate to the story that you are telling. But that's how far I remember. But I just loved to be in Philadelphia. Maybe because we were we were hosted by the African American bankers. So obviously the program that was lined up for us was beautiful. We went to the Amish community outside Philadelphia.
Oh, Lancaster? You went to
Yes,
Lancaster?
yeah.
Okay, yes.
And then we spent the day there. It was like, wow.
Best food.
I felt like, wow. Are they grouping of people like this? And then we got told the whole story. And now when you're telling me about, you find Italians, you find Jewish and all those, I can relate to that. But that was just once only, so I can't claim to really have been inducted into Philadelphia. But you never forget such first-time experiences. Yeah. So I'm
so glad to hear that.
Yeah. No, I
have to ask you. Did you feel the brotherly love? We're known to be the city of brotherly love. Were we loving and affectionate when you came to visit us?
Oh, it was a beautiful experience. We were taken to a local television station. And one of my friends that I just interviewed recently works for one of the banks here, Standard Bank, and his name is Mr. Mali. Delivered a sort of a small talk at that local television station. We were taken to a financial institution. I can't remember the name. It's greenish in color. I think it's an organization of black financial. It's a financial organization that has small enterprises in Philadelphia.
Okay.
And then
a part of
one of I don't know whether it was the boss of Mellon Bank then.
Oh, Mellon Bank. Okay.
Yeah.
Yes.
That hosted us for the evening in Philadelphia. So the whole trip was about bankers visiting banks. So we went to New York. From New York, we went to Washington, D.C. We visited Howard.
This sounds like a dynamic trip.
It was a dynamic trip. We visited Howard University in Washington. And then from there, the beautiful part that I will never forget, we took a train from Washington main station to Philadelphia. That was beautiful drive on a train to Phillies.
That's a great ride.
Yeah, and then we had a reception by these black members of the black financial institutions. It was really like brothers from Africa meeting brothers from the U.S. and sisters as well. So that was beautiful. And when you mentioned that you are from Philadelphia, I said, oh, it was meant to be.
Oh, yes, meant to be. I'm so glad you had a good time.
Beautiful. Now, I'm very interested at that time when you started to become exposed to that diversity. Yes. Did you start wanting to know more about cultures beyond the U.S., or was the U.S. enough to give you that challenge of understanding and living with different cultural people?
It definitely made me curious, and I got to learn about different cultures through so many of the girls. And what is so important about that experience for me is that even if you work somewhere with a lot of different people, you're so focused on whatever the company goal is or whatever expectations there are that sometimes you get to connect, but you don't get to fully and more immersively connect. But in high school, that's such a developmental time that when you connect with someone, you really get to sit outside on breaks, or you get to talk after class or have lunchtime together, and we're growing up together, if you will. So many of us are still connected online, Facebook, etc. But you're growing up together, and people are telling you some of their stories or some of the traditions and cultures in their own homes, and we're sharing all of that. We particularly had an event called International Food Day, where we were asked to bring in foods from our different cultures. And I have some Jamaican heritage in my culture, so I brought in curry chicken before
yes.
to the event. But I've had all kinds of different foods from around the world right there in my high school. And so when you're going around the line, it's like set up with tables and gallery style, and you're talking to those who made it, they'll talk about their mother helping them out and what kind of ingredients they put in it and why it's a special dish and it's made at a special time. So you learn a lot about culture through food. Mm-hmm. And food brings so much connection, it's heritage and tradition. So I learned so much. And one thing that I felt like was shocking at the time to me is that connecting with one of my Italian sisters for International Food Day, we were having a conversation about spaghetti. And she said that she was going to bring spaghetti with gravy. Mm. And so the picture in my mind was brown sauce that we call gravy that you usually put on like maybe a meat or something like that. And so, or like mashed potatoes, it's like brown. And I said, spaghetti with gravy? Like I was so confused. And she said, yeah, I'm going to make spaghetti with gravy. You'll love it. It'll be really good. And I'm like, spaghetti with gravy? I didn't think I would like it. And so I said, well, don't you usually put that on like mashed potatoes or something? And she said, oh no, you're thinking of something else. We call what you call spaghetti sauce, we call that gravy. So the tomato sauce, the red tomato sauce, mm-hmm. the Italians call that gravy. I didn't know that. It was such a way to just connect around food and learn something more. That we call it tomato sauce or spaghetti sauce in the store, but authentically Italian people call it gravy.
Wow, beautiful stuff.
So let
me just put the light on, speed that. Yeah.
Okay.
Beautiful. And tell me, other than education, as you're growing up in the, I don't know whether to call is it a suburb? Was it, if it was in South Africa, we'll talk about the suburb and the township, but you don't have townships in the US. It's just a residential place. So I guess come again?
We have townships.
You call them townships as well?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
In New Jersey here specifically, I live in a township in New Jersey. We call them townships.
Okay.
Yes.
So in New York, Harlem will Harlem be regarded as a township, or is it?
So New York, they call theirs boroughs. So each state is, each state is so different.
Yes.
In New York, they call their, if you will, townships or counties, they call them the boroughs. Mm-hmm. So they have like different, like 5 boroughs or different types of boroughs. Here in New Jersey, we have townships. We have different townships, cities and townships. So it kind of depends. Each state has its own little culture. Mm-hmm. So it's very interesting from state to state. For instance, in New Jersey, we have a lot of what we call turnabouts, where you drive down the street and if you want to make a U-turn, you're actually going in a circle. We call it a turnabout. Like in Rhode Island, they call them rotaries. Like it's, just different from state to state. I
see. And also in Phillies, what do you call them? What do you call the home state?
So we call them counties.
Counties.
So Philadelphia, like I grew up in Philadelphia County, which is all of Philadelphia. And then some of the suburban areas that would be like Montgomery County or Bucks County or Delaware County, which would be, if you related it to New York, like Brooklyn, I believe would be like a city, but that's their borough. Yes. So they call it something a little different.
So the question I wanted to ask, other than schooling, when you are not at your mother's house and you were out there in the community, what would you be out doing? Playing what sports, what games, what brings the young people at that age as you were growing together?
So we would go outside and we would play jump rope together. Usually the girls would play jump rope or hopscotch. We would play snowball fights in the wintertime. Like we would come out and build snowmen or have snowball fights with each other. That was fun. We also, like as a child, I took ballet, tap, and jazz classes. Mm-hmm. So I would do dancing. My parents sent me 2 ballet, tap, and jazz classes. Yeah. And the funny thing about that is for high school, I was accepted to go to Creative and Performing Arts High School. So I was going to try to take a career route in dancing, but then I got accepted into Girls High, and so I ended up going more of the academic route versus like the dancing route. So But that's what I did. I spent a lot of time doing that growing up.
What will you say are the values that you picked up from your upbringing that are still treasures for you now in this helping profession where you interact so much with so many people?
Yes.
Yeah.
I would say that people, one of the core values is that people always need help. And if you're in a position to help them or to serve them, you use your talents or your strengths, what you've learned to help another person. So that was one of the big things that I learned about. I grew up as a Christian in my religion, so I have a lot of values that come from that religion as well, to be able to help your neighbor, to be able to be kind to each other and respect commandments. So those are some of the high values for me. I also have learned just from my career that as long as there are people in the world, there will always be people who need something and want something. So as long as someone always needs something or wants something, you'll always have work to do. There's always work to do.
Yeah.
So those were some of my values. And my dad, I can't really remember many days where he didn't go to work. He has a very high work ethic. He's also very dedicated in reading the Word. So I always learned how important that God or a higher being, God, is always important in your life, and to have reverence for that.
At that time, as you were growing up among many other minorities, were you somehow aware of initiatives of bringing African American together to fight African American struggles, or is it something that no, I don't get involved?
To bring them together for struggles. I mean, so I feel like I'm grateful to have a good group of friends that we would talk about certain things, and most of us, like some of the struggles, they are unfortunately some of the struggles with African Americans, like it's always prominent. So you're always looking for ways to kind of jump those hurdles and still do what you need to do anyway. Sometimes, as you can see on the news, a lot of those issues are very prominent, and you're always dealing with them. You deal with them in school, you may deal with them in the workforce. It's always around you. But I feel very fortunate. A lot of my friends are professionals and working and parents, and so we're always trying to figure out how to jump those hurdles, encourage each other, and to make sure that we're still doing our work in the world as we need to.
Beautiful.
So that's a lot of what it is that I did. And I worked throughout high school.
Yeah, and then tell me the standard of living in Phillies compared to other cities, or let's say maybe your city where you are now. Was that an issue? It must be very diverse, I guess. It must be different for different counties.
It's different. So the backdrop of what Philadelphia was like back then and even now, it's busy. There's so much entertainment in Philadelphia. There's restaurants and theater. It's very culturally diverse and artistic.
Are you there?
The mall that you were talking about was probably got it.
Yeah,
the mall that you were talking.
Yeah, sorry, I it was a call. I ignored it. Let's continue.
Oh no, it's okay. It's
yes.
okay.
Yes.
The mall that you were talking about was probably King of Prussia Mall, which is a very big mall in the suburbs of Philadelphia. So there was a lot to do around commerce and shopping and art and theater, things like that. Where I live now is not too far outside of Philadelphia, but it's a different type of town. It's more of a suburban town, like single family home suburban town. And while there's a lot to do, there's not as much entertainment, if you will, as like Philadelphia with the theaters and art galleries and festivals and things like that. So, but New Jersey is the garden state. So we have wonderful fresh produce. You can drive down the road and see people selling produce, or a farmer's market where you get really great organic foods. So it's a different type of tempo here, but I love it here.
Yeah. Beautiful. So I want us to wrap up this early childhood to high school. And I'm sure at a certain point in time, you started wondering, what am I going to do post high school? At what point do you start having an idea of what you want, what line of education do you want to follow, and who helped you through that?
Yes. So one of the first jobs that I had was the year of going into from eighth grade to ninth grade, where my mother was working at a medical office, and I came in that summer and I would help with some administrative duties. I would call and confirm appointments and put away files, and that really got me interested and attracted into office type of work and how you can help people through businesses and office type of work. In high school, around 9th and 10th grade, I worked for a local community church. I was a youth summer camp counselor, and I tutored children after school in reading and math. So that was like one of my first jobs where I actually got like paid, not like under the table paid, but like paid. And then throughout the rest of high school, I worked from 10th grade year going into 11th all the way through early college at a retail organization. And so it was a kids clothing store out at a suburban mall that I worked at for many, many years. I ended up working my way up to becoming a key holder. I would open and close the store. I learned about metrics and how to sell clothes and bringing your values to the table to help people with customer service. So that sort of kind of formulated me or shifted me towards business kind of work. How you get inventory in and check it, what the years, what the numbers were from the year before and the year after, how to manage an office and a business. That started to formulate it, and you can do that at the same time, helping people with what they need. I like people, and I like to make sure that people get what it is that they need. So that was some of the early influence, and I worked for a wonderful woman at that time who was very instrumental to me. Wow. So that was like some of my early influence in high school work.
Yeah. What about the parents? We here in our country, we were discussing recently about the role that parents play in influencing the career direction of their children. And he says sometimes they become over-involved and they see themselves through the children, or if they don't get involved, they just don't really, perhaps not dictate, and then it becomes almost like abdication. And then, of course, there are those parents who will have a conversation, they'll have a coach or a mentor to assist. So it differs from families to families. But in your case, did you ever have to sit down with parents and say, Daddy, Mommy, I'm thinking of doing 1, 2, 3, and then they come in and say, maybe not that and that? How was it?
So they weren't so overly involved that they influenced me to do something very specific. But their involvement that I think helped to shape my career is when I was at that pinnacle point for 8th grade, whether or not I was going to go to a performing arts high school or an academic high school. That path into academics is what I believe sort of shaped my career experiences with diversity, with going to work at a retail organization. So they were always very supportive of the moves that I made. And after high school, I worked in hospitality for a little while, and that led me into human resources. Once I went into human resources, that's when my parents helped me a little bit more, because I had a critical decision, which was if I was going to stay in traditional college as a day student, or I was going to switch into my profession and start to go to school in the nighttime. And so that was a big family decision, if you will. So that's where they helped me, but they did not tell me you need to go to school to become a lawyer or a doctor or anything like that. It was they supported me throughout the journey.
But in general, in the U.S. and perhaps in Pennsylvania, what is the normal? Again, I'm asking you something that will probably subject to the culture where you come from. But maybe let's stick with African American communities, because that's what perhaps you will know better. What is the normal practice or the tendency of parents when it comes to children deciding on careers?
At large, for the most part, most parents want their children to go to college, or they want them to have a career that will make them financially independent and financially healthy, but also would make them happy. So you don't have, as in other cultures, I can speak to other cultures because, going to high school with other cultures, or when I went into the workplace, hearing the stories of others, there are sometimes some really strong influences of which way you need to go. My particular experience was that my parents supported me through my journey, encouraged me, were very, very nicely firm about me going to college and wanting me to go to college, but they wanted me to choose a career that they felt like was right for me and that I would want to do. But there wasn't intense pressure about what it is I needed to do besides be a productive citizen that helps people in the world. So
wow.
So.
Before we proceed, you stated that you have a Jamaican heritage.
Yes.
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 Tell us a little bit more about that.
Side.
Yes. On your mom. On your mom's side.
On my father's side.
Oh yes.
On my father's side, yes. So my grandmother is Jamaican, and she moved from Jamaica to the U.S. in the early 1970s. She was like early in her 30s. She wanted to make a life for herself over in a bigger country and get opportunities for the United States. So from my father's side of the family, that's where my Jamaican heritage comes. But my mother's side of the family, my mother was born in Pennsylvania, in Philadelphia. And so my whole lineage on my mother's side, where I've been raised, has been mostly it's all American on my mother's side. But on my father's side is the Jamaican heritage.
I'm told that everybody dreams to study at Penn State.
Penn State is an awesome school. I wish I had gone to Penn State, but it's an awesome school. So many people study at Penn State.
Yes.
They have a lot of pride around their sports team and the Nittany Lions. Many of the business professionals that I've worked with in different organizations in Philadelphia and in New Jersey have gone to Penn State. So yes, it is a pride in the Wharton Business School particularly is a world-renowned school for business administration and business professionals. People come from all across the world to attend Wharton. So, and that's right here in Philadelphia. We have a lot of great schools, but Penn State is one of the best. It's one of the best.
One of a friend of ours in the business community studied hospitality at Penn State. And she talks very highly of. I think she's a member of the alumni as well, because her parents were in exile during the old apartheid days, and the father, I think, worked in a number of diplomatic situations, and they ended up living in the States. And she studied at Penn State, and I've heard so much good things about Penn State.
Penn State is awesome.
Yeah. So you're going to tell us where you went to when we come back.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Let's take a short break, and then when we come back, I'm very interested to hear about your university years and the directions you have.